Chapter 246. If anything were to happen, he was ready to jump in at a moment's notice, every nerve in his body on high alert. A moment later, the door opened, revealing the room's inhabitant. Prince Ajane, with a slightly absent look on his face, slowly stepped out of the room. Spotting Yudhir seated, he stopped in his tracks. Is there a problem? Yudhir, not having initiated the conversation, asked the question lightly while studying the prince's state. I woke up and found there was no water. Under normal circumstances, before the prince even had the chance to seek water, his attendants would have catered to his needs. But the current situation was somewhat unique. Looking at Ajane's impassive face, now devoid of any attendants to fetch him water, Yudhir rose from his seat. I can fetch it for you. You needn't leave your room. No need for that. I can fetch and drink it myself. Yudhir couldn't help but think that the prince was using the need for water as an excuse to escape the stifling confines of his room. His claim of waking up unexpectedly was likely a lie. Using his abilities to fetch the water was simple. But if that wasn't what the prince wanted, he couldn't forcefully confine him to the room. Yudhir stood, alternating his gaze between the retreating back of the prince and the attendant's room, contemplating who to follow. If asked to choose between the prince and the attendants, naturally he would gravitate towards Ajane. If that's the case, I will assist you. Despite me saying it's okay, the prince headed towards the kitchen where they had eaten dinner. His darkened gaze didn't seek the water jug but roamed around aimlessly in the distance. In the end, Ajane stopped by a rain-streaked window, silently staring outside for a long time. Although the night was deep and the rain had almost ceased, the faint sound of drizzling could still be heard if one listened closely. Just when Yudhir was hesitating, wondering if Ajane intended to remain standing until everyone else woke up, the prince finally opened his mouth, murmuring low, There's a well outside. True to his words, there was a covered well right in front of the kitchen window. When Yudhir offered no response, Ajane turned towards a small side door tucked in the corner of the kitchen. Yudhir debated if he should warn him of the danger outside or let him be, hoping the freedom would ease his troubled heart. Amidst his dilemma, he decided to follow the prince. Instead of dropping like raindrops, the misty rain that filled the air soaked their hair as soon as they stepped outside. Yudhir silently motioned with his hand to scatter the raindrops that were soaking their heads, causing Ajane to look back. You don't need a raincoat to block the rain either? No, I don't. Having an assistant like you, the commander must truly feel reassured. He wasn't sure how to respond to that. When Yudhir stayed silent, it seemed Ajane hadn't expected a reply and turned his head back. He neither opened the well cover nor did he move elsewhere, just stood there, staring at it. Yudhir Ale, are you aware that the history of Nalan predates Or? No, I wasn't. The first emperor of the empire, after thwarting the Great Destruction and establishing Or, forged an eternal alliance with the countries that had assisted him. They promised not to infringe upon each other and always help as allies. Though this alliance broke down and morphed into its current form due to becoming vassal states in later generations, remnants of the past are still scattered here and there in Nalan. The languid voice merged with the gentle patter of rain, becoming a distant echo. Suppose, yes, just like the statue of the blind sage in the palace of Nalan. The statue of the blind sage was the spot that Kana had identified as the meeting place where one of his attendants had conspired his betrayal. As the statue was mentioned, a cold, bitter smile briefly flickered across Ajane's face before disappearing. The Nalan believe that the sage is Luma, the archmage who left the Empire. The Empire has denied it, of course. I can't verify the truth, but there are a few relics in Nalan said to be left by the blind sage. I have promised to hand one over to Orr. His words flowed calmly, but their content was shocking. Either, curious all along, tried to gauge the thoughts of Prince Ajane as he revealed this fact. Finding no answers, he maintained his silence. Perhaps it was his lack of surprise that prompted Ajane to smile. I see, you are not surprised. Did the commander already discuss this with you? Or is this again that look of surprise you are going to claim? This was a reference to something Ydir had said when they had met in the palace gardens. Ydir maintained silence for a moment longer, then shook his head. I was pondering why you chose to share this with me. You're the only one here who I can say I have known for a while. It's good to have someone to talk to, and you are one of the few who look at me without pity. He had seemed indifferent to the attitudes of the cavalry, but had he been aware all along? Ydir felt a little awkward as he made a small apology on behalf of his comrades. I apologize for their disrespectful behavior. It's okay. It must have been unavoidable. I understand. It's been just as unbelievable for me. Imagine how those observing must have felt. Ajane murmured casually and looked intently into Ydir's eyes. The only reason I brought this up is that I had a question to ask, considering you also serve a superior. What is it? Ydir took a step closer to Ajane to hear him more clearly. If someone stood in the way of the person you serve, what do you think would be the best way to handle it? The question seemed to stem from the words left behind by the now deceased attendant. Ydir furrowed his brow and answered curtly. If it's about what the one who died today said, I think it's not worth worrying about. Of course, I'm not bothered by his words. I followed the path I thought was right after much contemplation. I believe it's better to negotiate with the Empire and progress towards peace more quickly instead of clinging to relics that Nalan doesn't immediately need and risking internal conflict. But if those who think I am wrong continue to appear, what should I do? Ajane quietly responded. Unlike you all, I don't have any power. My power comes solely from those who trust me. But if my decisions keep causing unnecessary conflict among them, won't the path I want to take become even more distant? As a loyal subordinate like you, I wonder who you would want to serve, and hence I wanted to hear your thoughts. If that's what he wanted, Ydir could give him a satisfactory answer. Then there is even less need for you to entertain such thoughts. Why? Because it doesn't matter what choice you make. Ajane arched an eyebrow as if asking what that meant. Is this some sort of reassurance that such events won't occur in the future? That's not what I was asking about. My response was not intended in that way either. Then what? I meant just what I said. Despite the odd sensation of elaborating to Ajane, Ydir tried to keep his answers as concise as possible. I have decided to believe that whichever path or whichever choice the person I serve makes, it is the right one. So, their choices, even when confronted with those who blocked their path, having nothing to do with me. Although he had always held these thoughts, voicing them felt strangely satisfying. He had started to believe in Kishir's path, his choices, because remembering his past experiences revealed they were far better than his own attempts, which had only resulted in failure and death. How had their relationship, initially as dry as a desert, changed so much? Not just his physical form, but his thoughts, feelings, and values had all been entangled with Kishir since that moment, and they were still evolving. Ajane was silent for a while, his violet pupils, appearing black in the dim light, narrowed. Isn't that too blind? I may be the last person who should be saying this, but even those who stand above are not always right. Your words sound like those of a devout priest. Perhaps Udir responded internally to Ajane's words. That doubt was indeed a tiny thorn forever embedded in his heart. Is it normal to be so drawn to Kishir? How can I be sure that this choice is not a mistake? But the answer was always the same. Whenever he stood by Kishir's side and looked at him, he was reassured that his decision was right. I don't think I'm particularly blind. Surely, such people already exist by the side of the second prince. With such thoughts, Udir gave another answer. However, Ajane, apparently finding his words empty, gave a small laugh and soon wiped his expression clean. That's comforting to hear. I understand. It's truly enviable to learn the Empire has so many treasures I cannot possess. After saying that, Ajane hesitated for a moment. A question, seemingly suppressed throughout, slipped out from him in a whisper. But how can you trust the person you serve to such an extent? Is it because of the power they possess? So, he's talking about power again. Was that so important to him? Of course, power was important. In his past life, Udir too had felt oppressed by Kishir's power and had no choice but to follow his words, but not anymore. I'm sorry, but I do not wish to answer that. Not because your words are correct, but because I believe they should not be. At his cold response, Ajane blinked.